Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're basically going to be scientific detectives. We're going to follow the invisible clues that connect a scorching heat wave all the way back to its source. You know, we all feel the effects of extreme weather, don't we? A sweltering heat wave, a devastating flood. But have you ever wondered if you could connect one of those events to a single source? For years, that just seemed impossible.
But what if I told you that's all starting to change? A recent study published in the journal Nature is challenging everything we thought we knew about connecting these dots, and honestly, the findings could change how we think about climate responsibility altogether.
See, this isn't just about the planet getting warmer in general. We're talking about a whole new field of science that's developing methods to pinpoint responsibility for specific climate impacts. It's essentially creating a chain of evidence that leads from a heat wave right back to a smokestack.
So how on earth did they pull this off? Well, the scientists essentially put on their detective hats, and like any good investigation, they started with two key pieces of information: the crime scenes and the suspects.
First up, the crime scenes. To find them, they used the EMD8 Desert Database. You can think of it like a global logbook of the absolute worst heat waves on record, the ones that cause the most damage and the most tragic loss of life. Okay, so you've got your crime scenes. Now you need a list of suspects. For this, they turned to the Carbon Majors database. This thing is a massive collection of historical greenhouse gas emissions, tracing the pollution from the world's largest industrial producers all the way back to the dawn of the industrial age.
All right, so they have the where, the crime scenes, and the who, the suspects. But how you actually connect them? Well, this is where it gets really cool. They used incredibly advanced climate modeling to do the real detective work.
You know, the lead author of the study explained their method in this beautifully simple yet kind of brilliant way. They basically built a digital twin of our planet, a simulation so accurate they could run experiments on it. Here's the genius of it. In one simulation, they modeled our actual world, with all the historical pollution from a top producer included. But then, they ran a second simulation, a hypothetical world where that one company's emissions just never existed. By comparing the two side by side, they could literally isolate and measure the exact impact of that single company's pollution on our climate. So, after all that incredible digital detective work, what did the investigation actually uncover? Well, the results weren't just vague ideas, they were hard, specific numbers.
213. Let that number sink in. According to the study, that's how many severe heat waves around the globe were made substantially more likely and way more intense, specifically because of the pollution from these major fossil fuel and cement producers.
And honestly, it gets even wilder. The research found that for up to 25% of those heat waves, they would have been, and this is a direct quote from the study, virtually impossible without the climate pollution from these major producers. Just think about that for a second. We're talking about heat waves that pretty much shouldn't have happened at all.
And the study didn't pull any punches. It actually named names. It found that the emissions from individual companies, like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and BP, were so massive that they could be directly linked to some of the most extreme heat waves all by themselves.
But it wasn't just the giants of the industry. The study also discovered that even some smaller, lesser-known companies had pumped out enough cumulative emissions to directly influence extreme weather events. So what's the big picture here? Why is this such a huge deal? Well, this research represents a massive leap forward in a rapidly growing field known as attribution science.
Attribution science. At its core, it's the science of assigning responsibility. It's what allows scientists to go from saying something general, like the climate is changing, to something incredibly specific, like this particular heat wave, right here, was made worse by emissions from this exact source.
And all of this leads to one final huge question. This new ability to trace a disaster back to a specific source opens up a whole new world of conversations about accountability, about law, and about the future of our planet. So if an event can be traced to a source, what happens next? That's a question we're all going to have to answer.